Good evening and a warm welcome to our pupillage evening. Before I hand over to Tom, our head of pupillage, and the other members of Chambers from whom you'll be hearing this evening, I'd like to say a little bit about Hare Court, some of which you will have gleaned from our website and other sources, but a few things you may not. How would I describe Hare Court in a sentence? A long-established yet forward-thinking, friendly and inclusive barristers' chambers with a reputation for excellence in a number of fields of law. That excellence was recognised in 2022 by the award of Chambers of the Year in the LexisNexis Legal Awards, following a year in which members of Chambers appeared in more than 40 cases in the Privy Council and Supreme Court. When I interviewed for pupillage back in 1990, however, it was actually the friendliness by which I was struck above all else, both of the clerks and members of Chambers, and that remains as true today as it was then. In part, I suppose it's the result of being a smaller set, currently some 40 members. But more importantly, it's also part of the ethos of Hare Court, and it is something solicitors, other members of the bar, mini-pupils and pupils often remark on. And whilst, of course, we have grown somewhat over the 77 years since we were formed and continue to grow incrementally, that friendliness is something of which we're all proud and very much wish to retain. It starts in the clerk's room, where we have a highly experienced, friendly and responsive team comprising, among others, our clerks, our Director of Marketing and Business Development, and our Chambers Manager, all with a well-deserved reputation for a willingness to go the extra mile. And it extends to our members, many of whom give selflessly of their time to various in-house and external initiatives, with a view to supporting the practices and well-being of members and encouraging and helping those who wish to come to the bar. Now, what else marks Hare Court out? Well, undoubtedly the breadth of work done by our members and the opportunity there is to experience different types of work and develop the sort of practice you want without being forced down one route to the exclusion of another. Members provide a wide range of advocacy and advisory services in the UK and internationally, both at first instance and on appeal, and are ranked by the legal directories in numerous practice areas across a wide range of commercial and common law work. Our clients are likewise diverse, ranging from individuals to multinational corporations, as well as many governments and public authorities. There are, of course, areas in which we do more work than others, the most notable probably being general commercial litigation, Privy Council work across the full spectrum of the committee's jurisdiction, and both domestic and cross-border personal injury, including conflicts of law and jurisdiction. But members also practice in many other areas, including international arbitration, civil fraud, banking, financial services, insolvency, public law, inquests and inquiries, employment, professional negligence, and property. And we aim to ensure as wide an exposure as possible during pupillage to the various areas of work in which our members practice, of which you'll hear more from Tom in a moment. So with that brief introduction, I'll now hand over to Tom, who's going to tell you more about what to expect from this evening, about the application process, the structure and content of pupillage, how we make decisions about tenancy, and the support we provide to new tenants. So over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Howard, and good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining our virtual pupillage evening. The aim of this evening is to give prospective pupils an opportunity to learn a bit more about Hare Court, what sets us apart from other civil commercial sets, and importantly, to discuss and hopefully demystify the journey from pupillage application to tenancy and beyond. So what can you expect of this evening? As Howard said, I'm going to kick off by explaining the application process, what pupillage looks at, like at Three Hare Court, how we make tenancy decisions, and how we support our junior tenants. I'm going to interpose Nick Lee, one of our junior tenants, at an appropriate point to give some tips on how to make a good pupillage application. I will then introduce James Donovan, our senior clerk, who is going to briefly say something about the clerk's room. You'll then hear from Ben Channer, who will tell you about our mini-pupillage programme in Chambers. After Ben, you will hear from Azela Wijeratne, who is Head of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion in Chambers, and he will tell you some of the things that we are doing to promote EDI at Three Hare Court. You'll then hear from Catherine Bailey about life as a junior member of Chambers with a busy mixed civil and commercial practice. And last, and certainly not least, you will hear from Anna Gattrell and Tabitha Hutchison, our current pupils, who will tell you what life is really like as a pupil in Chambers. We'll then try to answer as many questions as we can before we conclude at 6:30. Now, as to those questions, we've already had some questions submitted, but if anyone watching and listening has a question that they would like answered, do feel free to use the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer as many of those as possible. If we don't manage to get through all of the questions, you can always follow up by emailing our dedicated pupillage email address, details of which we will put up on the final slide and is on our website. I should also mention at the outset, lest I forget, that next Tuesday, so that's the 12th of December, we're exhibiting at the Legal Cheek Virtual Law Fair, where we'll have 5 members of Chambers on hand between 2 and 5 p.m. to answer questions about pupillage and Chambers. So if you do have any unanswered questions as a result of the next hour, I would advise you to sign up to that Legal Cheek Virtual Law Fair and pay Chambers' booth a visit. So why Three Hare Court? For my part, there are 3 aspects which Howard has already touched upon in his introduction. The first is the quality and breadth of work Chambers has to offer, and as a pupil, you will be immersed in from the very start of pupillage. As I'll explain a bit later on, one way we seek to achieve this is by having our pupils work with at least 6 and sometimes 7 supervisors during their pupillage year, and thereby experience 6 or 7 different practices, which we think is a unique opportunity. The second aspect is the emphasis that we place on advocacy, which is reflected in our advocacy training programme during pupillage, and the fact that all of our pupils have a fully practicing second 6, which sees them regularly in court week in, week out. The third, and for me the most important, is the people. I can honestly say that Chambers is a friendly and welcoming set with a strong community feel. I say that as someone that joined Chambers as a pupil 22 years ago, and although personnel have naturally changed over time, friendliness and a sense of collegiality is something that Chambers has always managed to retain and is, as I say, I think very important. As I'm sure some of the speakers will mention later on, there are plenty of spontaneous and organised get-togethers within Chambers, so pupils have plenty of opportunities to meet and get to know everyone. So, applying for pupillage at Three Hare Court. All applications for pupillage have to be made through the pupillage gateway, which, as I'm sure everyone knows, opens on the 3rd of January next year and will close at midnight on the 7th of February. What are we looking for at Three Hare Court? Well, the purpose of our selection process is to identify pupils who we anticipate will be outstanding candidates to join Chambers as tenants and strengthen our areas of practice. We're therefore looking for candidates with a strong academic background, clarity of expression, strong people skills, and the commitment and energy to succeed in the competitive world of the modern bar. Ultimately, we're looking for strength across the board. So a bit like top trumps, if you perhaps feel your interpersonal skills might let you down, you can make up for that with strengths in other areas. Similarly, although we talk about a strong academic record, we will take into account substantial professional experience where an applicant may not have achieved the academic grades they might have hoped for. Now, Azela a bit later on is going to talk about equality, diversity in a bit more detail, but in terms of recruitment, it is right to say that Chambers is committed to diversity at the bar and ensuring that our pupils are selected from a wide range of backgrounds and experience. For this reason, we especially encourage and welcome applications from women, people with Black, Asian, ethnic minority backgrounds, those with disabilities, and those from the LGBTQI community, as well as other groups that tend to be underrepresented in the legal profession. Our commitment to equality and diversity is reflected in all of our recruitment decisions. In terms of pupillage applications, what that means is that all pupillage applications are blind marked at the sifting stage. So only the candidate's number is visible to Chambers. Chambers therefore does not know any of the candidate's personal information, such as sex, age, ethnicity, or other protected characteristics, save insofar as that information might be disclosed by answers that you've given to questions on the application form. All applications are then assessed and scored strictly by reference to defined objective fair criteria, and all members of Chambers that are involved in the selection process, including the sifting of applications, have received the appropriate level of training in fair and recruitment selection processes. As set out on the slide, once the applications have been assessed and marked, we shortlist the 20 highest scoring candidates who we invite for interview. This year, the first round interviews will take place in mid to late March next year, 2024. They will be remote interviews, as our experience over the last few years is that remote interviews work well. They allow us also to see more people than we might otherwise be able to if holding in-person interviews. And they also relieve some of the pressure on candidates who might not be based in London or might not find it that easy to travel to see us in the Temple. Moreover, as remote advocacy remains fairly common and is likely here to stay, remote interviews give us an opportunity to assess how candidates are able to present themselves and interact over a remote platform. I interview all first round candidates along with 2 or 3 other members of Chambers. Members of the interview panel are selected having regard to the need for maintaining an appropriately diverse panel, diverse in terms of characteristics as well as practice areas. And as I've already mentioned, each member being trained in fair selection methods. Those first round interviews generally last between 15 and 20 minutes, and candidates are asked a range of competency questions about their application. As we've set out on the slide, the questions asked are looking for evidence of 5 things: intellectual ability, legal knowledge and practical analytical skills, oral skills and the ability to relate to others, initiative, application and motivation, and lastly, reasons for applying to Chambers. Candidates are marked against those 5 competencies, and the 10 best performing candidates are invited for a second round interview. Those take place in person in Chambers unless alternative arrangements need to be made, and they will likely take place at the beginning of April next year. There is a slightly larger interview panel for second round interviews consisting of 4 or 5 members of Chambers. For consistency, I sit on the second round panel and the first round panel, whilst other panel members will not have been involved in first round interviews. I should say it's not the purpose of the second round interview to revisit territory covered in the first interview. Rather, it's designed to provide an opportunity for those with the greatest potential to hopefully shine. Second round interviews are a bit longer than first round interviews. They last about 30 minutes and they consist of an advocacy exercise followed by some further competency-based questions. In terms of the advocacy exercise, we provide the materials for that in advance, and candidates will be expected to spend about half the interview undertaking the advocacy exercise, with one of the interview panel playing the role of the judge. As with first round interviews, candidates are marked against objective criteria. The 3 criteria at second round interviews are oral skills and presentation, practical analytical skills, logic and reasoning, and interest in a career at the bar and in particular Chambers' work. At the completion of second round interviews, all candidates' scores from the first and second rounds are combined, and the 2 highest scoring candidates are made offers of pupillage. Now, before I go on to talk a bit about what pupillage looks like at 3 Hare Court, and to give everyone a break really from listening to me, I'm going to hand over to Nick Lee, who is going to give some advice on how to make a good pupillage application.
Thank you very much, Tom. Good evening, everyone. And the first thing to say is I remember being in your shoes a few years ago, attending open days like this, both in person and virtually. And now I'm fortunate enough to be 3 Hare Court's most recent tenant. And I know that the pupillage application process is stressful, juggling applications alongside your studies or your work. However, there are ways to ensure that you put your best foot forward in the process and give yourself the best opportunity to be successful in it. Now, I could offer a lot of advice today, but given the limited window I have, I've chosen 5 top tips. And this advice is applicable to every set you might apply to, not just 3 Hare Court. Firstly, preparation. That's my first tip. Obviously, in anything you do, any form of written piece of work, preparation is key. But in pupillage applications, you must ensure that you give yourself enough time to research each chambers that you're thinking of applying to. How you choose to organise that time is entirely up to you, of course. But what I would recommend doing is having a document or a spreadsheet where you put in that document or spreadsheet a list of chambers you're thinking of applying to and do your research on those chambers. What areas of work do they practice in? Have you got any existing experience with that set of chambers? Who do you know there? Those important points of information should be in a document that you can work with. The second thing that you should note is ensure that you read very closely the chamber's criteria by which you will be assessed. Of course, Tom, very helpfully, and it's on the slide right there, has outlined the criteria by which we assess applications at 3 Hare Court, but ensure that you know every chamber's criteria. And what I recommend is copying and pasting that criteria into a separate Word document you can work alongside your application with. The second core piece of advice I have is structure. And this comes down to how you choose to write the application itself. Of course, structure is important with any piece of written work, but it's absolutely crucial with a pupillage application. You only have a few hundred words per question to try and convince the person reading your application that they should invite you to interview. So there are ways of ensuring that you structure your piece of work well. The rule of 3, for whatever reason, is a rule that is often used. It's something that I employed when I was writing my pupillage application forms. 3 clear and distinct paragraphs setting out your motivation for applying to the chambers, setting out why you want to be a barrister, setting out the areas of law that you're interested in, or addressing the specific question you're asked to address. Another technique structurally that works well, particularly for competency-based questions. For example, describe a time when you had to face a challenge, how did you overcome that challenge, etc. A technique that works well, I'm sure you will have heard of it, the STAR technique. The situation, the task, the action, and the result. You explain the situation you were in, the task that you were asked to address, the action that you took in addressing that task, and then the result of the action that you took. It's clear and it's easy for anyone to understand and follow. My third core tip is a clear and concise writing style. A pupillage application is not the time to display your mastery of the English language and your knowledge of grammar. It's a time to be simple and impactful, not poetic. So ensure that you adopt a clear and concise writing style. And that effectively means that you ensure that you get to the heart of what you're trying to say as quickly as you can, and conscious, of course, that you don't have many words to do that in. My fourth top tip is evidence. It's crucial across the application form that you display a wide range of evidence, not relying solely on one piece of work that you might have done or one experience you might have had, but a wide range of evidence, and ensure that that evidence matches up with the Chamber's criteria. It should be said that there's no part of the application form that you should see as not an opportunity to display the Chamber's criteria. Even the work experience section where you outline all the various jobs you may have held, the various mini-pupillages you may have attended, and so forth. Use that as an opportunity to explain with evidence what you actually did, why you possess the qualities that are found within Chamber's criteria. And finally, my last piece of advice, my top tip, is proofread. It's a simple piece of advice. Of course, anyone should proofread their work before sending it off, but it is very important with pupillage application questions that you ensure there are no typographical or grammar mistakes. And also, it's important that it reads well and convincingly. So a tip that I have is ask someone unconnected to law to read your application question through. And if it sounds convincing to them, then it's probably hit the right note. So those are my 5 top tips, and I hand back to Tom.
Thanks very much, Nick. Excellent tips there. And if everyone follows those, it's going to make it even harder than normal to compile a shortlist for first interviews. So what does pupillage at Three Hare Court look like? What does it entail? Let's deal first with the nuts and bolts, namely number of pupillages and the award. So we offer 2 pupillages every year. And as I mentioned when talking about recruitment, our selection process is designed to identify pupils we anticipate will make outstanding tenants. Pupils are therefore not in competition with each other. Our aim is to offer all of our pupils tenancy at the end of their pupillage. And in this regard, we have an excellent track record of doing so, dating back now many years. The award next year is 65,000. This usually takes the form of an award of 55,000 for the first 6 months, and thereafter a guaranteed 10,000 for the second 6 months, plus receipts for work done in those second 6 months. There is, though, flexibility as to how the award can be structured. Now, something not mentioned on the slide is that up to £10,000 of the award may be drawn down in advance during the BTC. And as well as the pupillage award, Chambers also provides additional financial support for pupils so as to enhance the affordability of training, such as paying pupils reasonable travel expenses when travelling with supervisors to and from court or a conference out of Chambers. Turning then to what you can expect of pupillage, starting at day 1 and the all-important pupil supervisors. So on your first day of pupillage, you'll be met by Guy Mitchell, who is our Chambers manager. Guy will spend the morning and perhaps even some of the afternoon going through everything you need to know, from setting you up with Chambers IT to the more important things like familiarising yourself with the layout of Chambers, who lives where the coffee machines are, and important things like that. Guy will also walk you around Chambers and introduce you to the clerks and any members of Chambers that are around and not in court or not in conference. You will then be handed over to your pupil supervisor, who will be the person responsible for your training and supervision for the first 6 to 8 weeks of pupillage. Now, at Three Hare Court, we believe that pupils get the most out of pupillage when they are in regular daily contact with their supervisor, which allows pupils to learn a lot of things osmotically. It's for that reason that we encourage pupils to base themselves in their supervisor's room in Chambers, where they will have their own desk. Where this isn't possible, we have a number of hot desks in Chambers, 2 of which are prioritised for our pupils to use. Other flexible working arrangements can also be arranged, and we encourage all pupils and supervisors to have a conversation at the start of each new seat to discuss working arrangements and expectations. Now, as I mentioned earlier, pupils then change supervisors every 6 to 8 weeks. So that means in a typical year, pupils should have spent time with 6 or possibly even 7 different supervisors. The reason for this is that we think it's important that pupils experience the widest possible range of work. And what better way of achieving this than having a variety of pupil supervisors? Our current supervisors are set out on the slide, and as you will see, cover the whole gamut of work in Chambers. Our supervisors also range in seniority, which ensures that our pupils are not only seeing a wide range of work, but are also to see how practice develops at different stages of a career at the bar. So how is pupillage structured? Well, at Three Hare Court, we divide pupillage into 2 conventional 6-month periods. You have your first 6 and then your second 6. During your first 6, pupils usually sit with at least 3 supervisors, and the focus during that period is on doing written work for those supervisors. So, for example, drafting pleadings, opinions, skeleton arguments, and research notes. Pupils will, however, attend conferences with their supervisors. They will also go with their supervisors and shadow them in court. Supervisors review all written work and provide detailed feedback, allowing pupils to identify areas that need improvement and ensure that they're doing everything they can to meet the selection criteria for tenancy, which I'll come on to talk about in a moment. Although pupils will spend the most one-to-one time with supervisors during their first 6, we encourage all our pupils to undertake work for other members of Chambers and to get to know as many members of Chambers as possible. So to this end, if someone in Chambers is involved, say, in an appeal in the Supreme Court or in the Privy Council or an interesting trial, pupils will be offered the opportunity of shadowing that person And in those circumstances, pupils will be given copies of relevant documents in the case, such as skeletons or written cases, in advance, so that they understand what is going on and will have the best opportunity to discuss the case with that member of chambers involved, so as to make the most of that learning opportunity. As pupils approach the end of their first six, they are encouraged to go to court with the more junior members of chambers in order to gain relevant experience before they start their own cases. So in the second 6 months, our pupils learn to cope with handling a busy practice right from the outset, and usually they will find they gain a significantly higher level of advocacy experience than their friends and peers in other civil commercial sets. On average, I would say our pupils can expect to be in court at least 2 days out of 5, if not more, for the large part of their second 6. As well as court appearances, pupils in their second 6 can expect to have their own paperwork, as well as continuing to undertake written work for their supervisors. Pupils are also encouraged to contribute to news articles on Chambers' website, social media platforms, and also to attend networking events, so as to forge their own relationships and ensure their own professional development right from the outset. We also organise a series of advocacy exercises throughout the pupillage year, culminating in a mock trial towards the end of the second 6. The advocacy exercises are based on the same case, so pupils can get a sense of following a case through from start to finish. Those exercises are observed by members of chambers, and feedback is provided by the advocacy trainer that's running the session, which is usually a silk or a senior member of chambers. Performance in those exercises is not taken into account when deciding whether or not to offer tenancy to pupils. Moving on to feedback and assessment then. As I've already mentioned, pupils are given written feedback for each piece of work they do. If work is done for another member of chambers, that member is also asked to send a copy of feedback to the current pupil supervisor so that it can feed into the pupil's formal assessment. As well as feedback on individual pieces of work and informal day-to-day discussions, pupils have monthly appraisals carried out by their supervisors, and then a formal assessment at the end of each pupillage seat. Monthly appraisals involve a review of the work undertaken, a discussion about any feedback received from other members of chambers, and any future action development that might be required. At those monthly appraisals, pupils are encouraged to raise any issues they have about their progress and training in general. And then the formal assessment involves the pupil supervisor undertaking a review of all the work produced by the pupil over the course of the seat and completing an assessment record in which the pupil is graded. In terms of that grading, to give you an idea, it's out of a maximum of 4 marks. A mark of 1 means that standard has not been met, a mark of 2 means that standard has partially been met, 3 standard fully met, and 4 standard has been exceeded. Pupils are graded against Chambers' 5 key selection criteria, which I've set out on the slide: intellectual ability, legal professional skills, impact and advocacy, interpersonal skills, motivation, and temperament. In addition to grading pupils in the assessment record, supervisors will also provide concise and constructive comments under each criteria. Pupils are then given the opportunity to discuss the assessment record with their supervisor and record any comments they might have on that document. Through this combination of informal discussion, monthly appraisal, and formal assessment, we aim to provide pupils with consistent and transparent guidance on their progress and to maximise their potential to improve during the pupillage process. Turn next to the end of pupillage and the tenancy decision. Now, tenancy decisions are normally made after about 9 months or so of pupillage, which means, in real terms, about the middle to the end of July of your pupillage year. Those decisions are taken by chambers as a whole and are based principally on the considered views of the pupil supervisors, including the pupil supervisors' conclusions as captured in the formal assessments that we've just been talking about. So it therefore follows that what Chambers is looking for is someone who has consistently met or indeed exceeded the required standard by reference to our selection criteria. Now, generally speaking, that will be someone who has consistently demonstrated the ability to identify, analyse and argue the salient points, someone that's consistently produced excellent written work, shown that they can cope under pressure, and demonstrated that they have what it takes to develop a strong practice. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have an excellent track record for recruiting our pupils, which is obviously testament, firstly, to their qualities, but also hopefully to the training that we provide. Now, before I hand over to James to talk about the clerk's room, I want to quickly mention a few of the things that we do in Chambers to support junior tenants as they make the transition from pupillage to practice. I'll keep this as brief as I can, because you'll be hearing from Catherine shortly, and she can tell you about this herself. One of the key things we do is offer a very favourable rent structure for the first few years of practice. We also operate a mentor scheme for junior tenants, whereby a junior tenant is allocated a senior member of Chambers who is available to offer advice and guidance regarding practice development in a mentoring role. We also ensure regular practice development meetings take place between members of Chambers and the clerks. The purpose of those meetings is to enable the discussion of work allocation, work opportunity, marketing, networking opportunities, and also individual practice development, and to set objectives. Now, we understand those meetings can be particularly important when you're starting out at the bar, and it's for this reason we try and ensure that junior tenants have practice development meetings once every quarter. Now, I think you've certainly heard from me for far too long. I am going to hand over to James, who's going to tell you about the engine room of Chambers, that is the clerk's room. James.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'm James Donovan. I'm the senior clerk at 3 Hare Court. I've been a clerk with Chambers for a long time. I started in 1985, and I can tell you the bar was a different place back then. We currently have 6 clerks. There's Toby, Darren, Simon, Bradley, and Georgia, plus myself. We have our Chambers manager, Guy, an admin assistant called Scott, director of marketing and BD, Lisa, receptionist, Kat, and 2 part-time fees clerks, Sue and Nick. I lead the clerking team at 3 Hare Court, and for me, the best thing about clerking is the people we get to work with, both domestically and internationally. We're lucky enough to do some really interesting range of work, especially in the Supreme Court and Privy Council, where we'll probably do more appearances than in any other set of chambers. We have strong links with clients from abroad, and in particular with the Caribbean and with Mauritius. And I just thought I'd give you a quick snapshot of some of the work we've been doing in the last few weeks. So here goes. So we're halfway through a 4-week arbitration with in the Bahamas with a Silk and a junior. I've got a junior in Barbados doing a trial. I've got 2 counsel working on an arbitration acting for a foreign government against another foreign government. We got judgment in the Supreme Court on Griffiths, which is where we had 2 counsel from Chambers working. We came to the end early because there was a bit of a settlement for our clients on a 3-month commercial court trial in which we have 3 counsel. We've got several counsel working on various inquiries, COVID, Post Office, undercover police inquiry. And just to give you a quick snapshot of our BD, we had 3 members of Chambers and I attended the International Bar Association annual conference in Paris. That was only last month. So just a small snapshot of some of the work we've been doing in the last couple of weeks. Lastly, good luck. Back to you, Tom.
Thanks very much, James. I think next up, Ben is going to talk to you about our mini-pupillage programme. Ben.
Thanks very much, Tom. Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Ben Shannon, and I run the mini-pupillage programme within Chambers. I would say, first of all, that undertaking mini-pupillage in Chambers is not a prerequisite to applying for pupillage with us, but it does, as it is intended to, give, we hope, a good comprehensive insight into life in Chambers, the work that is carried out that you just heard set out by James, and a general feel for what you may expect should you apply and become a pupil with us. To that extent, then, we offer 18 mini-pupillages a year. Those are divided into 3 intakes, March, July, and November. We will be opening applications for our March intake in the new year. So if you are interested, then please do keep an eye on our website. Our mini pupillages take place over the course of 2 days. We aim to place our mini pupils with a different supervisor each day, so that ideally they get to go to court and see something in court, see a member in action, as it were, but also to spend time, equally as importantly, in chambers with their supervisor, being given and doing some written work, pleading and advice, skeleton argument or such like. Or sitting in on conferences with their mini pupil supervisor. And as I say, generally getting, hopefully, a feel for life in chambers and meeting a number of members of varying seniorities and who practice across a whole range of areas within chambers. Our mini pupillages aren't assessed, but that said, there may well be an opportunity subject to what you or what any candidate does during their time with us to undertake and complete an advocacy or a written exercise. And of course, feedback will be given if there is the opportunity for that on those particular exercises. Our mini pupillages they're not funded as such, but we do offer up to £100 in terms of expenses. On our website, you will also see links to the various assistance with funding for mini pupillages that the various inns can provide. Applying for our mini pupillages, again, is all set out on our website, but it involves supplying us with a CV and a covering letter. And the assessment criteria is similar to pupillage in the round, but of course, people applying for mini pupillages will be at generally an earlier stage in their progression to the bar, and of course, therefore, assessment is undertaken with that in mind. Principally, we are looking for intellectual ability, initiative, and an interest in a career at the bar, and particularly the work undertaken by chambers. Eligibility-wise, we accept applications from those who have completed their first year of a law degree or are on the conversion, the GDL course, or from other qualified legal professionals looking to transfer to the bar. And again, as with our pupillage programming in general, we do encourage applicants from groups who are otherwise underrepresented at the bar. To that extent as well, we also, as well as our mini pupillage program, are members and offer work experience placements from a variety of organisations. Again, you can see on our website, but includes Bridging the Bar and the Social Mobility Foundation. So that is a whistle-stop tour of our mini pupillage program, and on that basis, I will hand it back to Tom.
Thanks very much, Ben. Next, I'll ask Azela to talk to you all about EDI in chambers. Over to you, Azela.
Thank you, Tom. I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Officer at 3 Hare Court, and in that capacity, I chair the ED&I committee. And that's a committee which comprises 8 members of chambers at all levels of seniority. Now, 3 Hare Court is committed to the promotion of equality and diversity in chambers and to providing equality of opportunity and fair working environments for all pupils, members and staff. And we do this in a number of ways, but in the limited time available, I hope to outline a few of our core functions. They include the fair allocation of work, mentoring, our work concerning underrepresented groups at the bar, and outreach. Looking firstly at fair allocation of work, as Tom has mentioned, Chambers is committed to taking all steps to ensure that all members of Chambers receive equal access to and a fair allocation of work. And this is done primarily through the implementation and monitoring of a fair allocation of work policy. The policy seeks to ensure that when clerks put forward or select members of Chambers for work opportunities, they do so by reference to non-discriminatory criteria and in a way that achieves overall fairness in the allocation of work opportunities, together with equal access to the full range of work undertaken by members of Chambers. For pupils in their second six, unassigned work is distributed on a rotational basis by the clerks, and that is under the supervision of James, who you've heard from, our senior clerk. The clerking team also prioritise members of Chambers returning from periods of parental leave for a period of 3 months after their return to practice. Under the policy, marketing strategies of pupils and members also take into account equal opportunity considerations. And we do this really by ensuring that lectures, seminars, and social activities with our clients are organised so that there is fair opportunity to all members of Chambers interested in that activity to be involved in one way or another. And under the guidance of Lisa, our Director of Marketing and Business Development, we also aim to ensure that we undertake a wide variety of business development activities so that there is opportunity for choice and flexibility as to the activities that members of Chambers choose to take part in. As Tom mentioned a moment ago, mentoring also plays an important role in Chambers. Under the fair allocation of work policy, each junior tenant of fewer than 4 years practice and any member of Chambers returning from parental leave is entitled to be allocated a senior member of Chambers as a mentor. And mentors in Chambers are there to provide advice and guidance on issues such as practice development and issues of day-to-day practice management. Beyond the formal mentoring scheme, it's important for me to say that members of Chambers are always on hand to provide advice and guidance, whether that be responding to a phone call from court with a question or simply popping into someone's room or arranging a Zoom call with them. As Howard and Tom have spoken to, we are a friendly set and one where everyone's door is open. It's important to emphasise that the support does not stop at the end of pupillage. Chambers is committed to ensuring the equality of opportunity for underrepresented groups of the bar, and as part of that commitment, Chambers is proud to be a signatory to the Bar Council's Women in Law Pledge. Under that pledge, our commitments include ensuring that there is at least one female member of Chambers on all committees within Chambers, including, importantly, our management committee. Implementing and monitoring our fair allocation of work policy, which I've already discussed, including equality of marketing opportunity, reviewing retention and recruitment of members of Chambers and staff, and having a flexible working policy. Our committee is working towards conducting a gender pay gap investigation pursuant to this policy. Three Hare Court has also prepared an anti-racist statement, which builds on the BSB's own anti-racist statement and the Bar Council's framework for taking action on equality. That statement commits us to producing a race action plan, which the committee is currently in the process of doing. And the race action plan, we intend, will look at all matters, including target setting for recruitment of barristers from different ethnic minority backgrounds, mentoring, network consolidation and collaboration, targeted financial support, and ensuring that our websites, literature, and messaging demonstrate an authentic commitment to race diversity and inclusion. And just finally, it's part of fulfilling our various objectives and commitments. Three Hare Court collaborates with a number of external organisations and networks, some of which appear on the slide on screen. A good example of this is our work with the 10,000 Black Interns scheme. 10 KBI is a scheme offering internships for students and recent graduates who are Black or of Black heritage in a number of sectors, including the bar. And we are proud to have partnered with 10 KBI for a number of years now and have committed to taking on interns through their programme next year also. Our intern this year was able to observe part of a Chancery Division trial with one of our silks, attend client conferences and attend courts with a number of our juniors. As Ben mentioned a moment ago, we have also taken people on work experience placements from the Social Mobility Foundation and into university. And both of those organisations need to improve opportunities for young people who face structural and other barriers in education and work because of their socio-economic background. Members of Chambers and members of staff also support organisations and networks which foster inclusion and support for the LGBT+ community, including for barristers and members of Chambers staff. One such organisation is Free Bar, and the logo of which appears on the screen. That is a network which aims to connect people from those backgrounds and their allies and provide a forum of mutual support. It also raises awareness of LGBT+ equality and diversity issues specific to the bar and shares practices on workplace inclusion. That was a brief and broad summary of the work and initiatives of the ED&I committee at Three Hare Court Chambers, but I'd be very happy to take any questions that you may have on any of those topics. Thank you, Tom.
Thanks very much, Azela. I'm going to hand over to Catherine next, who's going to tell you about life as a junior in Chambers. Catherine.
Thanks very much, Tom. Hello, everyone. My name's Catherine Bailey, and I am a junior tenant in Chambers. By way of context, I was called to the bar in 2019 and started pupillage in Chambers in October 2020. So I became a full tenant in November 2021, which was 2 years ago, almost to the day, which is quite strange to say. So my intention in the next couple of minutes is to essentially give you a chronological run through of what it's like to work your way from practicing second six in Chambers to a tenant with a couple of years experience under in a hypothetical belt. So second six is very busy in Chambers. There is, as Tom has already alluded to, an opportunity from the beginning to gain exposure to practice in court. So you have your own hearings, combined with, at the same time, a busy paperwork practice. So that really starts from the second six and picks up throughout. In that sense, pupillage and the early years of practice in Chambers is different in some senses to other civil and commercial sets. From my point of view, I find that I have more court advocacy experience than my contemporaries, and I'm often appearing against practitioners who seem slightly less comfortable with the oral advocacy element in, for example, applications and trials. It also means that you gain exposure immediately to working in cases where your opponent is often sometimes more senior to you, which in many senses is a baptism of fire, but it's very helpful, again, for developing confidence and honing your advocacy skills. In terms of a typical week as a junior tenant in Chambers at the beginning of my tenancy, to give you a flavour, I went back through my diary in the end of 2021 and the early part of 2022, and I could see that in 1 week I had a fast-track trial during which I would have undertaken witness handling, cross-examination, and cross-examination of both a factual witness and an expert witness, closing submissions and the likes of the full gamut of oral advocacy. I was also in the High Court in the winders, so appearing in a winding up petition. And then at the end of the week, I had an application on jurisdiction and service out of a claim form. So it was quite a varied week. And in addition to all of that, I had a busy paperwork diary, writing defences, advices, and so on. So that gives you a sense of the breadth of your practice in the early stages of tenancy. Now, 2 years in, I still maintain the breadth of my practice. So at the moment, my key practice areas are commercial and insolvency. I do employment law as well. I also have a busy travel and cross-border practice. And in addition to that, I've been lucky enough to be involved in several Privy Council matters as well. So that gives you a sense of the breadth of practice. One of the other points that I'd like to mention about being a junior tenant, and again, this has already been touched on, is the support that you get through regular practice review meetings. These are an opportunity for you to discuss with the clerks the strategic direction of your practice. Speaking for myself, I don't have necessarily that kind of business acumen that some other practitioners at the bar, including junior practitioners, do have. So I find those meetings very helpful because, of course, as a self-employed practitioner, you do have to think about strategizing, maximizing business opportunities, identifying suitable marketing activities, and thinking about where, with the limited time that you have, in addition to all of your practice, you can focus your attention, be that writing articles, attending networking events, or preparing a seminar or a PowerPoint presentation to deliver to solicitors. So the practice review meetings that the clerks lead are very helpful for giving you that sense of support as you move through the early stages of your practice and think about the strategic direction that you want to take your practice personally. Since pupillage, to give a sense of what my practice now looks like, I have been led twice in the Privy Council. I've been led in the Court of Appeal. I've been led in recently just completed a 4-week High Court trial. And I've also had the opportunity to work on several cases internationally, Examples include Gibraltar, Trinidad and Tobago, and St. Lucia. So that's a sense of practice as a junior tenant. And I'd just like to finally mention a couple of points in terms of social side of things in Chambers. I am involved actively in a lot of Chambers initiatives. I sit on the management committee as the most junior member. I'm also a member of the Equality and Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And I also spearhead with varying degrees of success our Thursday Lunch Club, which is an arrangement to encourage members to come together and catch up with each other once a week. Being involved in Chambers things is a very helpful way to stay social, but I would just echo what Thomas said about Chambers being a very friendly and supportive environment. I'm very, very good friends with my co-pupil, Adam Riley, and we've always been very supportive of one another. So again, to echo what Tom said, as a junior tenant in Chambers, there's a real sense of supporting each other rather than competing against each other. That's my piece.
Thank you very much, Catherine. And as I said, certainly not last and not certainly least, Tabitha and Anna are current pupils, and they're going to say something about pupillage and what it's really like. And I'd like to emphasise this forms no part of their pupillage assessment as well. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tom. But no worries, I'm saying only good things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about post-offer pre-pupillage and then my experience the first couple of months. And then Tabitha's going to talk a little bit about how things have been post pupillage starting socially and also her experience. So I would say primarily echoing what's just been said, everyone is really friendly and supportive. And that was clear throughout interviews, but also since I got my offer. So for example, I wanted a drawdown. When I asked Guy, our Chambers manager, about that, he was very helpful, very clear on what I needed to do. The process was very easy. He put Tabitha and I in touch with our permission, which was really nice. It meant that we had the opportunity to get in touch before we actually started, which I know some pupils go to their sets. They start not actually knowing who their co-pupil is, or they found out via LinkedIn. So that was really great. And we also had communication on practical matters like laptops, what's recommended. Chambers has a great scheme. So for example, my laptop was purchased by Chambers and I can pay it back in installments. And they recommended a laptop for me, which was also brilliant. And we also had some GDPR training, which might sound dull, but when you start, you'll realise just how important that is. And again, there's people at other sets who've not had any of that. So from a practical point of view, that's been brilliant. And when I started, my supervisor was Chris Loxton, who was really friendly and has a very varied practice, and that was really brilliant. And it meant that rather than people at some commercial chancery sets where they see one thing over the course of 4 months, I must have done about 14 or 15 things with Chris. And that included cases regarding the Athens or Montreal conventions, which relate to aviation and shipping. I also worked on some jurisdictional issues and an unfair prejudice petition, which is a company law matter, which I actually ended up shadowing Ben for, and that was brilliant because that was seeing a High Court trial really from start to finish. And so I would say the variety that I've seen so far has been fantastic, and that's continued since I started with James Hawkins, doing much more personal injury, travel, litigation. I know Tabitha has started with Chris now, but she had Catherine Deal Casey as her first supervisor, who's got quite a different practice. So I'll hand over to her and she can talk about her experience with that.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Anna. Yeah, as Anna says, I started with Catherine Deal Casey, who is an incredible silk in Chambers. So that was a pretty amazing start to be sitting with and assisting Casey as my first supervisor. In fact, I don't think I know anyone else who has been supervised or is being supervised by a silk during pupillage. So that's a really rare and valuable opportunity to see some really fascinating work. With Catherine, I saw a number of very high value personal injury cases, which is her area of expertise, and particularly overseas personal injury cases. So that throws up a lot of fascinating issues about jurisdiction and choice of law, which I think has been touched on already, and ties into Chambers' very strong, broader international element, which is something that really appealed to me when I was at your stage and applying to Three Hare Court. As Anna says, huge variety. So even with Catherine, who's quite specialist in her practice, very specialist in her practice, there was one week where I saw 5 different cases in one week, I think. So very busy, very varied. I'd be looking at a fatal accidents claim in Cornwall one day and a Vietnamese clinical negligence case the next. So really, I found it a really fascinating time. And as Anna says, I've just recently moved on to Chris, who has a very different practice. But again, very busy, very interesting. And I'm looking forward to diving further into commercial law and aviation. In terms of the day-to-day, what you're actually doing as a pupil, again, varied seems to be the buzzword today, but it really is. So I've already seen a number of conferences with professional and lay clients, interim hearings, and I've got coming up in the next couple of weeks a strikeout application hearing and a full trial. So I'm really looking forward to that with Chris. Alongside that, of course, not only are you reading all sorts of papers and pleadings for those cases, but you're having the opportunity frequently to draft your own pleadings, opinions, skeleton arguments. And generally, these are all live cases. So I think that's something not to be taken for granted. It's not always the case at sets across the country. I found that very valuable because you really feel that you're sort of part of the action and you are able to see the cases through once you've done the work on them. Moving on from the work to the culture, just very briefly, I know it's been covered already, but yeah, and you've heard the word friendly throughout the webinar this evening. I think that is absolutely the right word. Anna and I think I can speak for both of us, have had an absolutely brilliant experience so far. Right from the beginning, we've been invited to a huge variety of events within Chambers and outside, conferences, the commercial and insolvency group drinks. So we've had the opportunity to meet the majority of the members of Chambers, but also some of Chambers' key professional clients, which was really valuable. Catherine's mentioned the Thursday Lunch Club, or TLC, which is advertised very creatively with all manner of 90s girl band memes and GIFs, which is something that's been a highlight of the start to pupillage. But in all seriousness, I can't tell you how many people have approached me and Anna to introduce themselves, to remind us that their door's always open, to offer advice and support and a listening ear. And that's really not to be taken for granted. It's been incredibly valuable, incredibly reassuring, and it makes such a difference knowing that Chambers is invested in our learning and development and that everyone really wants us to succeed. So thank you for listening, and I really hope that you do all put an application in.
Thank you very much, Anna and Tabitha. Now we're up against our sort of 6:30 deadline. I'm going to eat into that slightly, but only by 2 or 3 minutes, just so that we can try and answer some of the questions. I think probably we'll try and limit ourselves to about 2 or 3. The slide shows some of the pre-submitted questions. Now, some of those have been answered, I know, from what people have said already. I'm just going to pick a few. Perhaps the first one: how do you apply for pupillage as a foreign qualified lawyer? I can deal with this one. As I think everyone will know, there's three components to becoming a barrister. You've got an academic component, vocational component, and then pupillage or work-based learning component. Now, certain people like qualified solicitors, qualified lawyers from other jurisdictions, and legal academics, depending on those qualifications and your experience, may be exempt from some or all of those components, training components. If you fall into any of those categories, the best advice I can give, which sounds a bit like passing the buck, is to speak to the authorisations team at the Bar Standards Board. That is a team dedicated to dealing with waivers and exemptions. They will be able to tell you, based on your qualifications and experience, which, if any, component of training you might be exempt from. So that is the first question there. Perhaps the third one: what makes an application stand out at first glance? Do I need quirky or unique hobbies? Perhaps Nick, can I ask you to give a, as you said, employing some of your own top tips, a very brief and succinct answer to that question?
Yes, Tom, I'll try and demonstrate my best advocacy here. Well, I think the thing that would make an application stand out most is if you get the Chamber's name wrong. If you describe our name as something other than 3 Hare Court, I imagine it will display that you're copying and pasting an answer from somewhere else and not tailoring your application precisely. So try to avoid that, because that will result in the application going straight in the bin. In terms of a positive first impression, clearly a well-structured piece of written advocacy evidencing Chamber's criteria is going to go down very well. In terms of quirky pieces of experience you might have had, there's no prerequisite for making your application stand out in that way, but you shouldn't shy away from being yourself and speaking to those experiences you have in your life. For instance, I know, as Tom circulated an email about myself and my co-pupil and our hobbies when we first joined Chambers, the fact that I did stand-up comedy and impressions at the Edinburgh Fringe, that was highlighted as something which, in Chambers' mind, demonstrated the sort of skills that they're looking for, i.e. oral skills, advocacy skills, and determination to persist when confronting a challenging audience. So do think about those experiences you have and how you can align Chambers' criteria to those experiences.
Thanks, Nick. Perhaps one final question. There's a question there about well-being, pupils' well-being. Now, I think it's fair to say we have all been there and all understand pupillage can be at times very stressful. So as well as the support network provided by all of our trained supervisors, we have got a mentoring scheme in place for pupils, whereby each year an experienced pupils supervisor steps outside the pupillage training programme and is available for pupils to speak to on an entirely confidential basis. So that enables pupils to speak freely about any problems or issues they may be having, so they can be resolved hopefully as quickly as possible. And in addition to that, I think, as several people have said, it's very much a doors always open policy in Chambers. So my door is always open, as too is Azala's as head of EDI, and everyone's just an email or a call away if anyone wants to raise any issues. I'm afraid that is all that we have got time for. I apologise that we haven't been able to answer all of the questions that have been asked this evening. If someone does have a burning question they would like answering, as I said at the outset, don't hesitate to email the dedicated pupillage email address, which is on the slide now. Also, good opportunity to sign up for Legal Cheek virtual law fair next Tuesday, because then there will be 3 hours of people from 3 Hare Court that you can pose difficult questions to. So that's next Tuesday. So I think as we conclude this evening, I would just like to thank everyone that has contributed, but most of all, thank you for joining us on a rather cold and dark Wednesday evening. I hope that some of what has been said has been informative, possibly even interesting. If you take anything away from this evening, you should remember that every member of Chambers that you have heard from has been through the process that you are all about to embark upon. They've all come through the other side too. Whilst it might seem daunting and at times, I'm sure, a little overwhelming, hopefully some of what you've heard will have addressed some of those unknowns and concerns you might have had. And whilst at times it is going to be challenging, I would urge all of you, embrace the challenge, do your best, try and enjoy the ride, and hopefully see some of you at interviews in March. So thank you from all of us and good evening.